And hi again, everyone. We welcome you to the season finale. All good things must come to an end. The season finale of the fifth quarter, part of our Three Browns coverage. Dave DeNatale alongside Jay Crawford. Jay, I don't want to get too bogged down into Sunday's Browns win because, let's be honest, it was in many ways against the Bengals B team. But I'm happy that the Browns were able to close it out with a victory. That's better than the defeat. I don't care what any analytics say. And, there's so much now ahead for this team in this offseason, but it feels better to go out with a victory than a defeat.
Listen, I didn't write a column. I actually did a segment on What's New on Friday where I laid out a 5-point plan for what the Browns have to do to turn this around. And my first point was, and I still stand by it, you have to win the game. You must win the game on Sunday. And I know it's a psychological win, and it did cost the Browns a few draft positions, but this team has done very well in the draft under this Andrew Berry regime. I'm not worried about the difference between picking 9th or 13th or whatever. I'm not worried about that one bit. They'll figure it out. And once you get past that first pick, odds are the guy you're going to take at 49 is still going to be there at 54. Exactly. So I'm not too concerned about that. I think they had to win, Dino, because the stench of this season would have carried on into the offseason, and it just would have been bad juju. It would have been, not that there's not some bad karma around the team. You got to win the game. They did that. Step 2 of my 5-point plan was that Stefanski's got to give up the play calling duties. Hasn't addressed that yet.
Do you think he will, Jay? Do you think he will? Because I don't think he's going to do it. I'm with you, though.
Yeah, I don't think he will unless he's forced to do it. So if Andrew Berry or Jimmy Haslam have a meeting and they get together, then I would certainly think that that's about the only way he's going to give it up. He's very proud. He's stubborn. He doesn't want to admit the fact that he wasn't a success as the Browns play caller. Look, they're not mutually exclusive. You can be a good head coach without being the play caller. Mm-hmm. It's very rare that you're a good head coach while you're calling the plays. It just is. There's very few exceptions where guys have been able to figure that out. So I hope he does, but I don't think he will. So that's number 2. Number 3, and this really pertains to the relationship that everybody's been talking about the last week. Kevin Stefanski and Baker Mayfield need to summit. Now, I understand they had a meeting on Friday. By all accounts, it was productive, but if it wasn't, they wouldn't tell us. So don't read anything into their comments about the meeting. In fact, if anything, I could read more into what was said and how it was said, but I'm not going to do that. I do think it's imperative that the two, now that the season is over, once his surgery is done, they need to go on a fishing trip. Kevin and Baker and nobody else, no outside noise. And they need to spend 3 days together clearing the air. At the end of the year, I felt like control of this team was like a tug of war. And Baker was pulling on his rope saying, I've been put into a bad position and I'm hurt. And Stefanski was pulling on his rope saying, we've got to execute better. I've got to call the plays better. Nonsense. We know that this marriage can work. We saw it last year to the tune of 11-5 and a playoff win. So this nonsense that all of a sudden Baker can't do it and Baker can't be a playoff quarterback, that's ridiculous. They need to have that summit, patch up their differences because, Dino, and the NFL Network reported this yesterday, and I tend to believe this report. This relationship is lasting at least one more year. It's just there's too many moving parts for it to end in divorce now. The Browns would have to pretty much find a suitor for a $19 million a year quarterback for 1 year.
Coming off of a certain major surgery.
Coming off his worst pro season and an injury. So you're not going to do that. Look, if they find a suitor and they want to pull the trigger on something and enter the free agent market, then fine. But I think to me, a more logical plan would be to sign a Mitch Trubisky, who's an insurance policy for a year, and put him in the system and see what he can do as a regular quarterback in a system other than the one that he failed in Chicago. He's had a year to sit back and watch Josh Allen. I think Trubisky would be a nice fit here if they could get him at the right price. But you're not trading Baker. You're not releasing him outright. It's too big of a hit. So they've got to find a way to patch things up. Sit down, talk about the good times, remember how you did it, and figure out a way to get there. Let Baker speak his mind openly and freely with no media and no teammates, just the coach. Coach, I don't think you did a very good thing by putting me in the position that you put me in the Pittsburgh game. The coach should have saved the player in this situation. And I've always looked at this relationship, Dino, as the parent and the child. The child is the quarterback. The parent is the coach. And the parent, or the child rather, is always going to say when it comes time to extracurriculars and the fun stuff and playing, I'm good, I'm fine. It's up to the parent to use their eyes and to say, but you're not. You're not. You can bluff in practice, but when you get on, and Jonathan Vilma made this point yesterday, you can bluff when you're in practice and make it look like you're okay. But when the speed clicks up 3 notches and now you got to go 110, it's very difficult to bluff that you're okay. It is obvious that Baker Mayfield is a wounded duck, not just physically, but his psyche is wounded too. So get him healthy, listen to Baker's input, and also, and this was told to me by Bernie Kosar this past week. I thought this was some of the most spot-on analysis that I've heard of this whole thing. When you're trying to dole out who's to blame for what we saw in Pittsburgh. They continually put a rookie tackle against an all-pro defensive end with no chip help out of the backfield or no tight end. And I asked Bernie, whose fault is that? And he said, everybody's fault. Every coach I played for told me that I was the coach's eraser. The coach sends in a play. It's up to the quarterback to look at the defense and look at his protection and figure out if it's going to be successful. That's where a quarterback's IQ becomes so important. So Bernie, if he was put in that situation, would put a guy in motion. He'd put a tight end on that right side, even if the play call didn't dictate one. He'd direct a running back to go over there and give some chip help. And he would know that he's got to get rid of the football quickly. You know what the matchup is. You've seen it all night. You can't stand back in the pocket and survey the field for 5 seconds. It doesn't work. So Bernie's analysis was spot on. If the coach can't make the corrections during the game, and he clearly wasn't doing that, and he continually was putting in plays that put his quarterback in harm's way, Baker can't bitch about it if he's not doing anything to correct it. Send the man in motion. Fix it yourself. You're the coach's eraser on the field. The coach sends the play in. If it's not the right play, put him in the right play.
Right.
And so the blame is equally shared upon both of those guys. So, and again, I think that these are things that the offensive coordinator would be able to focus more intently on if he's not 50-50, also focusing on everything and every moving aspect when the defense is out there. He can't huddle up with his offense and tell them, guys, it's clear we're in a bad position here. We're going to have to change what we're doing. We got to get some help on the right side. Why that even needed to be an in-game adjustment, I'll never know. You knew what the tapes told you. You knew what was, but that being what it is, Baker is in a position to be able to help. So get Baker and Stefanski on the same page. Step 4 is for Baker to shut his ears, block out the noise. What are you doing responding to Mary Kay's piece?
Yep.
Why are you doing that? It is below you to do that. Let her write whatever she wants to write. History will prove whether she's right or wrong.
Right.
If she's wrong and she was fed, and I don't think Mary Kay would make that up. She's far better than that. No. Somebody told Mary Kay what Mary Kay wrote. Yep. Who it was, I don't know. If I'm Baker, I'm more upset and putting more of my energy into trying to find that source. Who's the mole? Who's
not
talking to the reporter?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not protecting the media because I'm a member. I've just seen this long enough, and I've talked to enough professional athletes to know that when you start responding to the dirt that's swirling in the press, you've lost already. You've lost. You're wasting your prep time and you're wasting your energy on trying to control what the media is going to write. Put cotton in your ears. Stop reading the internet. Get the hell off Twitter and Instagram.
Yep.
It does nobody any good. Nobody any good. We don't need to know what Baker's doing during the course of the season. We can watch it with our eyes. We don't need him to tweet things. We don't need athletes to do that. It's honestly, social media has been the wedge in a lot of professional sports teams over the last 15 years, primarily because the players don't understand how it should be used. So when they're using it to fire back and clap back at reporters with nonsense, you're wasting time and you're further dividing the team.
Right.
So step 4, stop listening, stop reading, stop responding, let your play do the talk. And all of your other energy should be focused on getting better. It honestly should be. And the other thing that goes part and parcel with number 4 is get some thicker skin, for crying out loud. You make $18 million a year. Why do you feel the need to respond and to constantly defend yourself? I understand what it's like to have things that aren't true said and written about you. It's horrible. It is horrible. But your character and your performance will drown all of that nonsensical noise out. And we're going to find out if Baker was, or if Mary Kay's report was true or not. If Baker asks for a trade, we're going to learn about it. And so then he's going to look even more ridiculous if what Mary Kay wrote about actually comes to fruition. Come to find out, you were wrong, Baker. You were lying and she was right. I'm not saying that's going to happen because I don't think it is. I really don't. But what has to happen is for Baker to operate in a vacuum aside from all of that noise. You should only care what the 52 guys in that locker room say and think about you.
Yep.
Focus your energy on winning them over, not the media and not the fan base. We don't matter come Sundays at 1:00. And the 5th thing is win the offseason. And I'm confident they can do that.
Yes.
Andrew Berry and the front office and the scouts, they've done a terrific job of recognizing the needs of this team, which this year they're blatantly obvious what this team needs. But they've done a good job in the last year, 2 years, of finding what we need and then finding the best way to address those needs. With a pass rusher, is it better to do that through the draft or is it better to go sign a Jadeveon Clowney? Well, they got that right. They signed a guy to a 1-year deal that was hungry to prove that he can still play football in this league. So Clowney and the way he performed on a short-term deal to earn his next contract, that was great. And if the Browns end up having to pay more money for him, so be it. They'll gladly pay for that production. But they have identified their needs and they've gone out and they've found the players that they need, be it through the draft or through the free agent. Do that again in this offseason. And if you do all 5 of those things, in my view, this team is going to come back and be just as competitive as they were in 2020. You and I know, and everybody that watches this league knows, that the difference between now 8-9 and missing the playoffs and say 10-7 and getting a home game in the playoffs is that much. Yep. It's 2 plays for the Browns.
Yep.
It's literally 2 plays.
Yeah.
They had 5 winnable games down the stretch that they lost in the 4th quarter. They've got to play their best football in the biggest moments. So you can throw that onto my blueprint. Find a way not to choke. Find a way to be clutch. And that's it. They turn 8-9 into 12-5 or 13-4 and a home playoff game like that. But they've got to remain focused. And this team does not need a blow up and an overhaul. And you've got Baker for 1 more year. If he plays great, you sign him to a long term. If he doesn't, then you go into the quarterback pool and you try it again.
All right, I love the Jays 5, and we'll lay them all out on the website to go with the story at WKYC.com. Can Kevin Stefanski, in addition to whether or not he gives up the play calling, and I tend to agree, I just don't think it's going to happen. Can he change his DNA a little bit? We talked about all year long playing not to lose in the fourth quarter as opposed to sometimes playing to win and putting teams away. How does he change his DNA and essentially his team's DNA to do that, to win those close games?
That's a great question. That's the question, because he's going to have to do it. If you look at, do you know which team in the NFL is the Browns' spirit twin?
Yeah, doppelganger. The Vikings.
What'd they finish this year? 8-9, right?
They were 8-9, yeah.
8-9. And go look at the games they lost. They lost games exactly how Cleveland lost, because they got leads in the first half, got conservative in the second half, and then got pinched at the buzzer. And they almost lost the game to the Steelers after leading 29-0.
Right.
The reason I bring this up is because Kevin Stefanski is off of that coaching tree. He is off of that coaching tree. And when you watch the Vikings and you watch the Browns, you see essentially the same thing. Kirk Cousins and Baker Mayfield, I think, are very similar. They're almost the same guy. Minnesota has a premier running back in Dalvin Cook. The Browns have a premier running back. They've got two premier running backs in Chubb and in Hunt. They're very similar on their talent base. Yet this year, instead of snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. They found ways to lose games. Go and look at the Viking season and how it unfolded. It is the exact parallel to the Cleveland Browns. Exactly. Yep. And so Stefanski's influence as a head coach obviously came with him to Cleveland. There's no question about that. But your question is the question of the day. Will he be able to change his DNA? Because this isn't really so much a philosophical change, Dino. Right. This is the difference between a coach that coaches not to lose as opposed to a coach coaching to win the game. Yeah. And we know who those coaches are. We've seen them through the years. Andy Reid comes to mind, although Andy Reid got bit because in the game against Cincinnati, when he had a 2-touchdown lead, he went into conservative mode and their offense took a dirt nap and they lost the game, and that cost them in terms of their playoff position.
Right.
So that's very atypical of Andy Reid. Andy Reid is pretty notorious for putting his foot on a team's throat and then applying real pressure. Bill Belichick has done that through the years. Bill keeps his starters out there. He runs his game plan. It's not up to me to go easy on you guys. It's up to you to stop us. Mm-hmm. And if you can't, shame on you, but we're going to do what we do. And so I don't know if he can find that next gear and switch from being that conservative coach that wants to win by a point, or he can go to the area of blowing out the bad teams, beating the good teams in close games, and then to be a truly excellent Super Bowl caliber team, you got to find a way to beat the other best teams in close games. Now, this year, the Browns, listen, the Chargers are the best team to miss the playoffs in a very long time, in my view. Yes. And they did it because their coach tried to be the smartest guy in the room. Yes. Brandon Staley is the reason the Chargers are done this year. Yep. And as bad as it feels to be a Browns fan this year, can you imagine having that quarterback and that offense and your season is over? That is unconscionable. Yeah. And he tried to get cute by calling a timeout. Why he did that, I will never know. And the Raiders came out after the game was over last night and said as much. We were going to take a knee until he called the timeout. Now you don't know what he's going to do. Is he going to try to get the ball back?
Right.
So now you're not going to run the risk of being out-coached. You're just going to do what you know you can do. Kick a field goal on the last play of the game. You're in if you make it. You're in if you miss it. Done. So Brandon Staley is the reason that the Chargers aren't in the postseason. But I say all of that because you've got to find a way to beat the great teams. This year, the Browns lost 9 games, Dino. 7 of those losses were to teams that made the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Only 2 of them were blowouts. The other 5 were one-score games in which the Browns had the ball with a chance to take the lead in the fourth quarter and failed. Just give them half of those, 3. And now instead of 8 and 9, you're 11 and 6, and you're hosting a playoff game.
Right.
So it's that close. So I know it felt like we finished 4 and 13. We didn't. We're close. And you don't need to start blowing things up, because all of these folks that are saying get rid of Baker, they've got short-term memories. Because before you get rid of a quarterback that has taken you to the playoffs, you better have another one in the wings. And I don't know who that guy is. So your question is the question of the offseason. And really, I think it's going to determine the future of Kevin Stefanski as the long-term solution here. Can he change his coaching philosophy? Can he be the guy who calls plays in the third and fourth quarter the same way he does in the first and second? They were outscored in the fourth quarter of games this year, almost 2-1.
Yep.
You will never make the playoffs if you're outscored in fourth quarters of games 2-1. That's just not going to happen. So I hope, to your question, I hope the answer is yes, he can change.
Yeah, we'll find it. We will certainly, that's going to be something to watch as this offseason progresses. Jay, I can't thank you enough for doing this with me every Monday after Browns games, and I'm sure we'll be talking more in this offseason. And but thanks for a great season of the fifth quarter, my friend. I really had fun doing this.
I've enjoyed doing them as well, and thanks to everybody that's watched on a regular basis. We appreciate it. Hopefully, when we talk again next September, we've answered a lot of these questions, and the team is pointing in the right direction. We should have an easier schedule next year. We know that. And look, I don't know. I know that, in the eyes of some, it hurts our draft pick and everything else, but they didn't finish in last place.
Yep.
And the other thing that I really wanted to point out that I've heretofore forgotten, this team beat the divisional champion Cincinnati Bengals twice. And I know yesterday was kind of they didn't have their starting quarterback. We didn't have our starting quarterback. They played a lot of backups. All of that is true. All you got to do is revert back to the first game in the series when we beat the pants off of the Bengals down in Cincinnati. So this team, and Baker Mayfield is 3-0 against, I don't know if he's 3-0 because I don't know if he played. I don't know if Burrow played both games against the Browns last year. I'm not sure.
I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember.
He hasn't lost to Joe Burrow.
No.
And so for everybody who's saying that Baker's got to go, I can give you 100 stats why that's true, and I can give you 100 stats why it's not. But the most important reason why it's not true is because we know what he did healthy last season, and we can write off a lot of what he did this past season because of physical liabilities. Yeah. So bring him back healthy, give him the tools that he needs, get an offensive coordinator that's willing to bury teams when they have the chance, and let's go do 2022.
Yep. Go fishing. Go fishing, guys. Go on that fishing trip. Go on that fishing trip. Jay, my friend, great stuff here on Fifth Quarter. Thanks so much, my man. I appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for watching our Three Browns coverage on the Fifth Quarter right here on WKYC.com.